But I knew for a fact one thing I did not want to be. Any guess?
Tell me.
I didn't want to be a pastor.
You didn't want to do this.
I did not want to do this. This is not what I had in mind. And he says, well, Johnny, I'm glad you feel that way, but are you sure that God is calling you? Because now you've got confirmation from everyone else. But have you heard God's voice? Don't talk about love. Be love. Be the person that you want to see. Be the change you want to be. Welcome to another episode of the Chronicles of Faith podcast.
This is a podcast where we're going to be looking at people in our own community and their encounters that they've had with Jesus.
My name's Pastor Johnny.
And I'm Pastor Matthew.
We hope you enjoy.
Hello and welcome back. Thanks for joining us for another episode here of Chronicles of Faith. Today we have someone who's pretty special to a lot of us. We have the one, the only, Pastor Johnny. Pastor Johnny, thanks for being here.
Hey, Pastor Matthew, thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is exciting. It's interesting because a lot of people already feel like they know you because they've seen you on stage, they've seen you preach. But really, as a pastor, we don't get to know the Pastor Johnny. We don't get to hear his whole story. Often you're teaching us about God and we don't get to hear as much about yourself. So Tell us a little bit about you, your backstory, how you kind of got to where you are now.
Well, a lot of you would know me as Pastor Johnny. Others would know me as just Johnny. Most people would know me as just Johnny, actually. And if you follow me on Instagram, it'll either be Portuguese on the loose and preacher on the loose. Now, how that story came to be, in 2015, I got my driver's license. And one of my friends told me, oh no, there's another Portuguese on the loose. And I was like, I actually like that username. Because at the time, I didn't have Instagram. And all my friends were going about it. And they're like, I just didn't get Instagram. So I decided, I'm going to get Instagram, but I'll only get it if I get the perfect username. So I stayed a few months without it, and then I got the username, Portuguese on the loose. Hence, preacher on the loose, and just everything afterwards has been on the loose. And yeah, I feel it accurately describes who I am.
So that all came out of a joke.
That came out of a joke, yeah.
Well, it's a good friend. You should tell him a thank you because it served you well.
Yeah, we're still good friends. We're considered lifelong friends, siblings almost. If you.
So you mentioned Portuguese. Yeah. I know that you're from South Africa, and now you're here in Jakarta. Tell us a little bit about that. Have you always had a knack for travel? Were you expecting to be overseas at this point in your life, or how did you get about that?
Not at all. I'm from a tiny town. If you guys know it, Carletonville, if you've heard of Carletonville, if you haven't, just Google it. It's one of the smallest towns in South Africa. We've got the deepest mine in the world.
Okay, there you go. That's not bad.
Yeah, deepest gold mine? Something like that. I'm a terrible rep for Carletonville, but that's where I'm from. Tiny town. We had like 3 high schools in the town growing up. So a very small town, and I never in a million years thought that I would be out of the country. In my mind, it was always like a dream. It was always something that happens to other people. But I always thought that I was going to be in the small little town. So no, that wasn't always the case.
What brought you out here? What finally did it? Was it just good opportunity? Was it an impression on the heart? Was it an accident? How'd you get out here to Jakarta? And even before then, I believe you've traveled a bit too.
Man, it's a long story.
Okay.
In short, it was all God. Mm-hmm. In short, it was all God. But the story starts many, many years before. The story starts when I was in primary school, actually. Mm-hmm. So we're in primary school. My sister's doing one of the programs at church, and she needs a participant to retell one of the stories. And I was like, why don't I do it? I was 10 years old at the time. She hadn't thought of asking me. And she was like, what? Are you sure? And I was like, yeah, So I tried it. I loved it. And it went really well. And that was pretty much the beginning of when I started participating in church, speak up in front or telling stories, telling children's story in church. That was the birthplace of it all. From there, I was also practicing in school. I did a whole bunch of public speaking in both English and Afrikaans. I took Portuguese classes, so we sometimes had to do speeches in Portuguese. Afrikaans is a language in South Africa for those who aren't from South Africa.
Yeah, help us out here. How many languages do you speak?
That's a rough one. Okay, so I speak English, Portuguese, Afrikaans, fluent. Spanish, good enough. I studied in the Philippines and I got quite good at Filipino. And right now, since I haven't been practicing, I'm not as good, but I still like to include Filipino just because it adds the number of languages you speak. So properly 4, but 5.
And how's that Bahasa Indonesian coming along?
That's more keywords.
Yeah,
okay. I'm not confident enough to include Indonesian, but I can get around, say a few keywords. I can tell them I'm still waiting, I'm on the road, I'm leaving. You know, just daily interactions.
The things you need, the
things
core
you need.
ideas.
How's it going for you?
I would say it's worse than what I wanted to be at this point, but similar stuff, you know, able to navigate, talk a little bit with people, but it's a fairly easy language, but I think the accent isn't something that I'm used to in Idaho. We don't have a huge Indonesian population out there. Yeah. And so it's taken me a while to say, okay, what are some of the sounds or the words that you don't often hear and that I'm having to kind of get used to, you know? So besides that, I think it's going all right, but just give it time. We'll get there. You know?
Yeah, we give it time. But yeah, I did a whole bunch of public speaking in school. I did a lot of drama, a lot of poetry, sight reading. So that was always my spectrum. Very, very arty, creative side. When it came to the memorizing side of things, for example, history, I was terrible at that class because there's just a ton of memorizing. And I just struggle to memorize. I struggle with names. You know, sometimes people come up to me and they ask if I remember them. I probably remember your face, but I just can't get the name. It's just anything that has to do with names. I really struggle. So that's always been one thing. But that's how it started. And the more I participated in church, the more church members would tell me, "Hey, you're going to be a pastor one day." And I was always like, "No, that's not happening." You know, my dream was that I was going to corporates. At the time, my sister was studying chartered accounting, and she was my older sister, so first one in the family to go to university. Very big thing. And she's studying chartered accounting. In my mind, it was like the greatest thing, you know. And so I wanted to follow that route as well. And so I was like, economics, accounting, those are all my favorite subjects in school. Up until a certain point where accounting kind of messed me up, but that's another story. we don't talk about that.
A podcast for another time.
For another time. Yeah, if you struggle with accounting, I can relate. I can't help you. But so the story goes on, and I changed my mind so many times. Okay. I remember one of the things I wanted to be is I wanted to be an inventor, and one of the things I wanted to have was I wanted to have a baboon zoo, like a zoo for baboons. And that was it. Just baboons. I loved baboons. I don't know why I did, but I just did. I was like 9 years old at the time. And in my mind, being an inventor means you just make it. There's no scientific method. There's no principles. There's no rules. You just make it. So the world was endless with things that I wanted to make. And then reality struck in and I realized I can't be an inventor because you can't just make things, you know? Certain things like perpetual motion just is never going to exist. It's always a hidden battery or something. And after that, I wanted to be an accountant, and then there was computers involved, and then there was economics. And then one time I said that I wanted to be a doctor, and my whole family burst out laughing at me. They burst out laughing and they said, "Johnny, you struggle to memorize history. How are you going to study to become a doctor?" And I was like, I believe I can. Oh, and this is another thing. Because I grew up in a house filled with women. I had 3 sisters and of course my mom, so 4 women, and then my dad and I, 6 people in the family. And for those who grew up around sisters or mom or something, when you share a shower, you're always going to find long hair clogging the drain.
Yep. Yeah.
And that grossed me so much. It just turned me off completely. And one of the things that they said, how on earth are you going to be a pastor if you can't even, a doctor, if you can't even face hair in the drain? So that's something that I remember vividly to the day. So that's why I'm not a doctor. I'm kidding. That's not why I'm not a doctor. But eventually, that's pretty much what happened. Went through high school. It reached a point where I just decided, maybe I should just do ministry because that's what everyone's saying. And but yeah, that wasn't the case. There was a bit of a plot twist in that. But that's pretty much how everything came to be. I will say though, now growing up with ADHD, you fidget a lot. Even now, fidget a lot. You can't keep still. You're sitting, you're walking around, you're jumping up and down. I for some reason, pay more attention when I'm fidgeting, when I'm doing things. And a lot of kids who grew up with ADHD, and even adults who still have ADHD, can relate to that. But one thing that really crippled me, I might say, was the interests, the number of interests that you have. Because I had an interest in everything. That was another reason I struggled to make up my mind. What was I going to do? You know, I would go from one thing and go to the other, and I would start a myriad of projects and never be able to fulfill them, never be able to finish. And it's just all over the place. I mean, I took aptitude tests. I took aptitude tests with a psychologist, and all my scores were like really high. I showed high interest in everything. They said, Johnny, you can literally choose anything you want. And I was like, oh, shucks.
That doesn't help at all,
That doesn't help at all. Just tell me what to do. Because you're left in a spot where you don't know what to do. You're so overwhelmed and you almost just blank out. It's like a fight or flight. And a lot of the times I would flee. I found myself running away a lot of the times. I'd start a whole bunch of things. I knew I wanted to be a lot of things, but I knew for a fact one thing I did not want to be. Any guess?
Tell me.
I didn't want to be a pastor.
You didn't want to do this.
I did not want to do this. This is not what I had in mind. No. When I looked at my pastors, I was like, you know, bless you. You're doing the Lord's work. What a humble guy. I don't want to be you, though. It was a greatest plot twist. I never expected this. I didn't want to do it. But yeah, go through high school, fell in love with economics. That was one thing that I wanted to study. And a trend that I see, I fall in love with whatever those around me love. So my older sister, she was doing chartered accounting, and I wanted to be a chartered accountant. My other sister, the second one, she became an educator, and I wanted to teach as well because I love teaching. I love literature. I love Shakespeare. I love poetry. That's where I absolutely thrive because it's all creative work. My brother-in-law, he was studying economics at the time, and now he's an economist. And because of him, I was like, you know, maybe I can do this. And I fell in love with the subject. I was doing, up until grade 9, I was doing really well in accounting. Grade 10 became a little bit lazy, maybe. can't confirm that. And I just flunked accounting. I still passed, but I knew that if I didn't drop it, that I was just going to fail. So I left accounting, took up computers, fell in love with computers, you know? And so I decided, you know, I'm going to go into computers. Long story short, I have a talk with one of my other pastors, and I tell him, you know, I think I should just learn about ministry. You know, maybe this is what God's calling me to do. Everybody is telling me to do it. Let me see what it's like. And so my pastor at the time, he was really supportive. He walked with me. He mentored me. He nurtured and discipled me. Whenever there was a camp meeting, I would go with him. And I remember one year that I was working with the teens with him, you know, doing whatever it takes. So I've been working with teenagers from when I was still a teenager myself. That's why when you look at me and the way that I act, you might see a teenager in terms of behavior. I believe, you know, although mentally, I believe that I've done well for myself. I'm responsible. I'm diligent with my savings and that sort of thing. But in terms of character, I don't think a person should have to grow up from everything, if that makes sense. So I've been working with teenagers from the time I was a teenager, and I absolutely loved it. I was like, if this is ministry, that's what I want to do. Because you're singing songs with actions and all of that.
Oh yeah, it's like the fun side of ministry where you get to be goofy and do all that.
And so that happens, and I talk to one of the superior pastors, one of the guys on top, and I tell him, hey, I've been thinking and talking to people, and I think I should do ministry because everybody says I should do ministry. This is the direction that everybody's sending me to. And he says, well, Johnny, I'm glad you feel that way, but are you sure that God is calling you? Because now you've got confirmation from everyone else. But have you heard God's voice? And I was like, shucks. I just made up my mind.
And now they're back to indecision.
And now you're back to indecision. I decided, this is like grade 11. Okay, I'm going into ministry. This is what I'm doing. Everyone says I should do it. It must be from God. And he points this curveball at me. I am like, what happens from here? Where do we go? And so I'm praying about it. I'm thinking about it. I'm still participating in church programs. I'm going to camp meetings. I'm doing things in church. I preached my first sermon at 16. It was about, we don't need to talk about that. Fortunately, that first sermon isn't up on YouTube. You know, it wasn't that bad, but it's still embarrassing. It's so embarrassing.
Yeah, the first couple are always a little bit rough.
I mean, you grow. You really grow as a speaker, you know, especially with preaching. Preaching isn't storytelling, nor is it teaching, nor is it drama or acting. It's completely different. And so while you can incorporate certain things from those areas, you can't rely on it fully. It's a different form of art. It's a different form of speaking. And so
Yeah.
first time, really nervous. Didn't go as well as I wanted, but it went well, you know. I'm still here, so clearly it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
God's been gracious, man.
Did they ask you to do it again?
They did.
No, they did. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so that's
There's
a
our
good sign.
sign.
That's a good sign. If they don't ask you again, that's a bad sign. Like, just change direction. And so I'm praying about it, and it takes forever. And God is just silent during this time. I don't know if he's silent or if I'm deaf. It could be that I was just deaf, dumb, and oblivious, you know, because we're human beings. That's what we are.
Yep.
Sometimes we're just really deaf to God's words. I go through high school and I reach the middle of grade 12, and there reaches a point, at least in South Africa, you need to, I forgot when it is, but I think by September, you need to have applied for universities and programs and what you want to study. And it's the middle of the year. And I'm like, I have no idea what I want to do. And so I decided in the middle of the year that I was going to take a gap year. And so that was the plan. But I wasn't just going to laze around and not do anything. I was going to be an intentional gap year where I'm working and studying online or doing something, you know. And so end of the year comes, December. It was the second week of December. Still remember that. It was the second week of December. It was a Friday night, and I'm praying. I said, Lord, I really need you to be open with me. I need you to be honest. Not that God is always honest, right? But I need you to be really, really explicit. These are my words. I told him, God, I'm dumb. Please make it as obvious as you can. Show me if this is what you want. Because I didn't want to be presumptuous either. You know, there are people who have stories of faith and they say, God, if this is your will, make this happen. And sometimes it happens. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad it happened. But I didn't want to be presumptuous. So I said, God, give me any sign, anything. Just make it extremely obvious. I kid you not. I'd been praying for some time.
Well, if he wants to speak to you, he has, 4 languages to pick from at this point. So you're making it easy on him.
Yeah, he had 4 languages to choose from. Actually, there were a few more. Because when I went to the Philippines, I started learning Filipino, and I forgot some of the Tswana. Tswana is one of the local languages in South Africa. I forgot, for some reason, when I picked up Filipino, I lost out on the little Tswana that I knew. So he could have chosen 5 languages.
Yeah.
5 languages.
Okay, so you're having this prayer. It's intense. It's a season of just trying to discover.
I'm having this prayer. It's an intense prayer. It's an intense season. It's a Friday night. Kid you not. After a whole year of battling with the subject, just being utterly confused. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Because at the time, something I left out. A year prior, I had met a Filipino family at one of the camp meetings. And they told me, hey, Johnny, you should consider going to the Philippines. You know, it's this. And I was like, ooh, go overseas, tell me more. Until I found out that, you know, the Philippines just is one of those areas where you get the most natural disasters. You get typhoons and hurricanes, volcanoes. It's in the ring of fire. And they've got flying cockroaches that bite, you know. And I heard all these things and the bugs and the insects and the flooding. And I was like, I can't even swim. If I go to the Philippines, I'm going to die. Literally everything's trying to kill me. So Philippines was completely out of the book. I swore on my grave, I am not going to the Philippines. I said, God, tell me the sign, but it's not the Philippines.
I'm noticing a theme here.
There is a theme. There is a theme of saying, God, not this, and just running away from God. And so in December, the next day, after praying on Friday, on the Saturday, I go to church on the Sabbath, and one of my old pastors is there, Pastor Ernie Rex. Right now, he's serving as an evangelist. He's retired, but he was one of my pastors. I think I was probably 14 years old when he was my pastor, and he just stops dead in his tracks. I haven't seen him for a few years, and he stops dead in his tracks, and he says, Johnny. And his eyes are like shocked. He looks like he's seen a ghost or something. And he says, Johnny, I've just been praying. I've been praying for somebody to give my library to, his theological books. I've been praying about someone to give my library to. And I think the Holy Spirit just told me that I need to give those books to you. And I was like, okay, God, that's clear.
Yeah.
That's very clear. And I was like, a part of me,
That's awesome.
a part of me was scared, but I think a greater part of me was just so excited, you know, not even relieved. Yeah, I was relieved, but I was so excited because it was so obvious that God said, Johnny, ministry is for you. And I was like, not everyone has an experience where God tells them specifically, that's the field that you're going to. And to be one of those people that God says, this is where you're going, it felt like such an honor. I had shivers all over my body, shivers down my spine, my eyes are wide. I started tearing up. It was wild. I was 18 years old. My voice still like on the verge of cracking. It started cracking when I was 15, but you know how high school is. And so you got the skimpy little 18-year-old boy, and I'm like, whoa, that just happened.
And to have that from someone who's such a pillar of faith.
Oh man, I tell you.
He's done it. He knows about ministry, and he's there affirming this for you. That's awesome.
It's amazing. It really is amazing. And I've got to give credit to the members at church and the pastors that I had, not only the pastors that served at church, but the guest pastors who would come and visit, and the elders at church, and this pastor, and just, there was a theme. There was a lot of community involved. And I don't know how far I would have come if I didn't have that community from the beginning. I have to thank my mom for this, because at the time, earlier in my childhood, my dad wouldn't come to church with us, you know, and he wouldn't come to church with us because he would be working, and my mom was the only one who took us to church. So it was us 4 kids with my mom walking to church in the African heat, in the African sun. My parents started from very little, by the way, but that's a story for another day. Walking to church every single Saturday, every single week. I don't remember missing out on a week of church. If it was missing out, it would have been because of like maybe really, really, really bad rain and we didn't have a ride to church, or maybe there was a camp meeting and we didn't go, because, you know, we grew up in Carltonville, and at the same time, my parents weren't big on traveling. So they didn't go places. They didn't go to camp meeting and that sort of things. And if they did go, it was only for the day, for a few hours. So I never really got to experience much camping with the church as a child growing up. But being ingrained in that community, a community that helped me grow, a community that walked with me every step of the way. I remember I had this little briefcase that I would carry to church. And in this briefcase, I had my church keys, you know. I think it was at 13 that I finally got the key to every single door in church. It was such a cool responsibility.
It sounds like you have a pretty cool church and church family.
It was.
Here that
it
was
really
building
was.
you up.
Small church. You're small town, small church, but really cool family. I was doing the sound. I was locking up the mics and projector and just like all the media and managing all of that. And I just had this opportunity to grow, to learn so much. There was so much growth that I experienced in the church. I improved as a speaker because of the church. I improved in my knowledge of tech because I'm a tech geek because of church. That sounds weird.
Yeah.
you know, just so many things. It's because this community that helped nurture me, that carried me. And looking back, whenever I go back to South Africa, I always have to preach at least one sermon at this church, you know. And that's the kind of community I grew up with.
Man, well, it's inspiring to hear it, but I also bet for a lot of people listening, it's equal parts terrifying. So I'm sure a lot of people have had that experience of, Lord, I'll do anything, just don't make it this.
Yeah.
You know, don't send me here. Don't make me do this job, whether it's pastoral or something else that's on their hearts. And every time they hear stories like this, I'm sure that it pops into their mind, like, oh, man, I wonder what crazy adventure he's going to take me on from hearing stories like yours. And I've heard a couple of times now, you've mentioned, having a lot of hobbies, but pulling away, or you might have mentioned running away from some of them. And I wonder if that's a little bit of foreshadowing. We're going through this series and kind of asking people to attribute their lives to a Bible character that they feel a familiarity with. And I'm wondering, what is that character for you as you've talked about this story in your past?
I don't want to say it yet.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a clue. It's a man who runs away a lot. It's a man who not only runs, but fights with God a lot.
Okay.
I remember after I got this clear call from God through my last pastor, I applied for an online course because I was still taking the gap year. I said, this is definitely happening. I'm taking this gap year. I'm going to take it to grow, learn, and just gain experience. So I went online and I applied for an IT engineering program that I was going to do online. I paid for it. It went through. Everything was right. I got my proof of payments and everything. I said, okay, cool. And then a week later, a few weeks later, this is in the middle of December, beginning of January, I get an email. All of a sudden, the funds are returned to my account and the payment didn't go through. It wasn't successful. So I wasn't able to sign up or register for the class. This is interesting. But I decided not to pursue it yet because I had already signed up for another program. It was an evangelist training that was going to happen in Durban in South Africa in February. So I said, when we're done with this evangelism training, I'm going to sign up for this course again. We're done. We go through the whole evangelism series, amazing facts in South Africa, meet Doug Batchelor, really short guy, but pretty chill. For those who know, if you know, you know. And on the second last day, I receive a call, and it's one of my friends at the time. He says, Johnny, how soon can you get down to Cape Town? And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? He's like, we need you. Come work here. And I'm like, what? Also people in the church, but all the way in Cape Town. So it's about 1,500 kilometers away. And so I say, okay, let me think about it. Let me pray about it and I'll get back to you. And he says, you need to give this answer now because we need you now. And I'm like, okay, hold on. I'll get back to you. And so long story short, I get back on the Sunday, Monday, 6 a.m. I'm at the airport flying to Cape Town.
Oh man. It's a quick turnaround.
It's a quick turnaround. At 18, I moved out of the house. It wasn't planned. Nobody was expecting. I asked him, where am I going to stay? He says, don't worry, we've got you covered. I say, what about transport? He says, don't worry, we've got you covered. And the doors are just opening. And so I get to Cape Town. I'm working for this guy also in the church. I'm doing signage. I'm learning design. I'm learning printing. We're printing things for the hospitals and books and publishing and all of that thing. It was really, really exciting. I got so many experiences there. I'm at the front desk. I'm the one answering the phone call. And we joked around a lot about it. Because when you've got a small business, you kind of do everything. And so I gave myself the title of production manager. Because I was just doing everything. I was at the front desk. I was at the back. I was doing signage. Obviously we had people on board and we had other people helping in different areas. But I just took the name, and my boss was like, yeah, sure, you can do that. And so I printed out little business cards, and it had the company logo, Johnny de Almeida, production manager.
Hey, it looks good on a resume, so why not?
I wasn't even 19, dude. That was a really big thing. It was really cool. I'm there, and during this time, I'm still battling with the idea of the Philippines. Now it's been resurfaced, because while at the evangelism training course, I meet the same Filipino family. But this time it's the dad that I meet, and the dad is talking to me, and there's another guy who studied in the Philippines along with his wife, Ben and his wife Joy. Right now they're in Cape Town, they're in Heidelberg College, and they're talking to me about the Philippines and their experiences, and they're telling me, Johnny, the Philippines is a really good experience. You should go. It's going to be good. You're going to love it. And I think about it and I'm debating, and eventually I'm like, let's try it. Let's try it out and see what happens. Up until this point, I've been running away, but God's been clear that he wants me to go into the ministry. So let me try it. And only if everything goes through really smoothly will I go to the Philippines. So I send in an application. They accept me. I'm like, okay, that's cool. They tell me that the next step, I need to get all my documents notarized, and I need to apply for a visa and all that sort of thing. So I leave Cape Town Friday, 6 a.m. I arrive in Johannesburg at 8 a.m. on Friday. And so from there, we drive to Pretoria and we process everything. By 4 p.m., I had every single document. To give you perspective, I've got friends who did the same thing and it took them 3 weeks.
Man.
I only had one day. I flew up on the Friday and I bought a return ticket on the Monday morning. It was just amazing.
Just all worked out. It's all
everything working so smoothly.
Yeah, doors opening. I mean,
exactly. And it just made sense. I spent all this time running from God, fighting with God, fleeing from God, that I reached a point where I was like, what if I were to just go blindly, Mm-hmm. Not blind in the sense that it would be the blind leading the blind, but this time blind in the sense that I know God's got me. And if something happens, God still got me. And that brought a lot of assurance. And that's exactly what I did. And I went through the Philippines. I studied there. I returned to South Africa and I studied there. And now I'm in Jakarta. Now I'm in Jakarta.
Taking you all over.
Yeah, no. When I got the phone call, you know, finding out if I'd be interested in this sort of thing, I thought about it. And it wasn't difficult saying yes. It was quite easy saying yes. Just because looking back at my track record, I didn't want to be the kind of person who keeps running away and fighting God. And I almost see myself in Jacob. That's my guy.
In Jacob, huh?
Jacob, that's my guy. That's my homeboy. Jacob, the brother of Esau, the one who stole his brother's birthright. You know?
Yeah, when you said running away, I was like, okay, thinking of these different characters, but Jacob, I see where you're going now.
Jacob's the one, you know. And he was an integral part in college. And it was in college, actually, that I got to see the parallel between my walk and Jacob's walk. How I got to see the times that I'd been running away, the times that Jacob ran away, the times that the reason Jacob had to run away so many times was because of his own doing. He would mess up, and then he would try and get himself out of that situation. And it was a theme over and over. And when you look at their family, they were a really broken family. Abraham, we know him as the father of faith, but how many times did Abraham act out of faith, without faith? You know, lying about his wife being his sister for fear of being killed. And his son Isaac does the same thing to the same king, the same Egyptian king. And then Jacob is born, and Jacob and Esau have got this conflict between each other, and they're fighting between each other. And Esau is the daddy's boy, and Jacob is the mommy's boy. And of course, having 3 sisters, I was the mommy's boy, you know. So we had that as well. And I see this parallel. I see the struggle that I've got, and I walk this walk, and I look at Jacob, and I'm like, wow, here is this man. It took him his whole life. He ran from God countless times. He ran from Laban. He ran from his brother. He ran from his father, and until it reaches a point where he stops, and God is wrestling with him. God is fighting with him. And Jacob refuses to let go. And he says, because he realizes while fighting that this is no ordinary man that he's fighting with. And Jacob says, I'm going to keep fighting. I'm not going to let go until you bless me. I need that blessing in my life. I need you to set me free. I need you to assure me, to remind me that you are going to be with me. And that reminds me of my time in high school, just praying time and time again. That's a story I was reflecting on. Lord, I'm not going to stop praying until you are clear to me, as clear as you were to Jacob. Give me this revelation. I need it now. I'm stupid, God. And God gave that revelation just as how he gave Jacob that revelation. He left him with a cripple, but that cripple served as a reminder his entire life that God was good, man. God was good.
So what's your cripple? Is it the coffee addiction?
I don't know. No, I'm not addicted to coffee. I love drinking coffee. I love cooking. I love a lot of things, but yeah, I'm not really an addiction guy. ADHD, I'd say that was one of the biggest cripples in my life. But I mean, even now, there are times that I still struggle with it. Even now, I can see times and moments where it affects my life. It affects my hindrance and just overall as a person. But the more I surrender to God, the more I remind myself that, you know, maybe I don't need to be in control of all these minor details. I've been able to let go of because one of the things that I struggled with, especially when you've got a bunch of interests, you want to micromanage everything. You want complete control of everything. And that's exactly what Jacob struggled with. He wanted complete control of everything. But he also had his mom who was pressuring him and telling him, hey, Jacob, you should do this, because if you do this, you will get this blessing, and you'll do this. Because she's remembering the time where God tells her that one brother would rise against the other and one nation would rise against the other, referring, of course, to the Israelites or the descendants of Jacob. And so we see this in Jacob's life, and he's always constantly trying to control the narrative, controlling the scenario. He does this with his uncle Laban time and time again, and Laban deceives Jacob, and Jacob deceives Laban. He goes on, and he reaches a point where Jacob wants to marry Rachel. He has to wait 7 years, and Leah's still not married, so he gets tricked and he marries Leah, and he works another 7 years, and then he marries Rachel. So on that note, I pray that's not me.
I hope for you as well. That's 14 years is a long time.
So I'm proud to say that I'm dating someone right now, and she doesn't have a sister, and she is the younger sibling. So, but Rachel was the younger sibling as well.
Yeah.
But she's an only girl. Okay, so that I'm safe.
You're not having to work or anything? You don't deal with the father? Okay.
I hope not. I mean, if the dad's watching, please don't make me work. But just the whole experience of how God has walked through me, of how I've learned to let go of the minor details. Man, when you let go of those minor details, when you say, I'm letting go and letting God, that's what makes the difference. And that's why I'm in Jakarta. That's how I'm in Jakarta, because I said I'm leaving things behind. I was in South Africa for 3 years. I was pastoring in South Africa. I was settling down in South Africa. Things were good. Things were comfortable. Things were organized and structured when I was in South Africa. And all of a sudden, here comes this point. I'm 27 years old, right? You reach a point in your life where you have to get responsible with the things that you're doing. You have to be responsible and a good steward in your finances, in your time, in your relationships with people, in your organization, in your churches, in your family, community, all those things, And it's a lot easier to be all of those things when you're surrounded by all of those things.
Definitely.
But now, similar to your experience as well, leaving everything and starting all over again, but going back, it was easy saying yes. Number one, I'm still not married. Yeah. Making this move when you're married is really tough. Moving with children, with a wife, it's something that a lot of people don't have. And so I was really blessed in that I get to experience this before I get married.
Yeah, now's the time. And even just the sheer amount of stuff that you have to accumulate. When you're married, you're trying to, settle more. Yeah. It's tough in that stage of life. So there's a beauty to what we have right now.
There is. And so we let go, and I realized that, man, Genesis 28:15, that's what God tells you, Jacob. I will not leave you and I will not forsake you until I've done what I've promised to accomplish in you. And that's what brings me comfort every single day.
It's powerful.
It's powerful. And that's basically saying, my child, when I call you somewhere, it doesn't matter what happens. I'm with you to the end. I mean, we look at God as God, and of course we should. We should give him all our praises. God is holy. God is majestic. But I think we also need to learn to look at God as our homie. Because when you think of a homie, you think of someone who's never going to betray you. You think of someone who's always got your back. You think of someone that you might not talk to for several months or several years, but when you call him, that guy's got your back. And I learned to look at God as my homie. Of course, he's my father. He's my God. He's the creator. He's so many things, but he's also my homie. And that's why I find peace. And as I tell my story, man, I think it's only just begun. And I think with a lot of us, our story has only just begun. But I don't know. If I can share a message, of love, a message of caring, a message of inspiration and hope, make God your homie. Make God your homie and understand that, look, sometimes things will get messed up. It's the reality of life, but God will always be there to help you through it.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I think it's an attribute of God that a lot of people struggle with. Sometimes we see him really easily as, this almighty God and him moving strings around, but remembering the fact that he's doing all of it for our good.
Yeah.
He has that plan set out for us for our good.
Yeah.
That even the trials that he's putting us through, Hebrews talks about how that's like a father disciplining a son and saying, I'm doing this for your benefit because I'm going to craft you into that person that I need you to be.
Yeah.
And so seeing God as that homie, that when you're in those spots where life sucks, he has your back. He's the one you better call. Yeah. He's the one to get you through it. I love that you bring it up like that. And homie, it's got that very familiar,
100%.
He's close by.
100%. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So tell me, where does that bring you right now? As you told this story, you talk about Jacob. Talk to me about the right now.
Well, right now, I still struggle with a lot of things. I still struggle with ADHD, still battling certain battles as you would, such as life. But I find myself not running away as much as I used to. Sometimes I do still run away. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I do still try and run and hide and fight like Jacob did. But I believe that every day is a journey, and every day I get a little bit better, just a little bit better at not running away, at staying, at focusing on something, at fixing something, you know. And I've seen it play out in a lot of things. I've seen it play out in my relationship with my family. I've seen it play out with relationship with friends and members. I've seen it play out in my romantic relationship with my partner in South Africa. We've been doing distance over my entire period here in Jakarta, and it's just amazing how despite the distance, we've only been able to grow deeper in love, having great, really, really good communication. And so that's where I find myself right now. I'm not too sure what tomorrow holds. I'm not sure what the future holds. I don't know how long I'm going to be a pastor at Crosswalk Jakarta. I don't know how long I'm going to be in Indonesia, in Asia. I don't know where I'm going to be. Am I going to settle in Africa, in Europe, in Australia, New Zealand, America? Are we going to the moon? You know? But one thing is certain. My eyes are fixed on heaven. And it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter who you're with. What matters is that the whole time you're walking with God. And there will always be opportunities. There will always be people that God brings you to. There will always be doors that open, experiences that you learn. That's where I find myself. Everything that I do, I try my best. You know, I try my best to live a Christ-like life. I try my best by loving people. I try my best to not only preach the gospel, but live the gospel. Where I find myself just as a regular servant of God. Yeah, I introduce myself as Johnny because I want people to know that, hey, we're all missionaries, despite what your calling is in life.
That's beautiful. I appreciate that. And as you talk about seeking to be like God, you know, the ways that he's taken you on this journey, how he's still working through you, still developing you, still challenging you, and you're still having to put that faith, not knowing what the next step is, even what tomorrow holds. Yeah. And so seeing that you're still struggling through it yourself, even as a pastor, and still having faith. It's not a discouraging thing for you, but now it almost seems exciting when I hear you talk about it, that growth that he's taking you on. That's amazing. If I can ask this question next, as we've been looking at people's stories, how God is shaping them, what he's been revealing to them, we've been asking, what does it mean for you? I see on your shirt there, it says love well.
Love well.
What does love well look for you in your context, and what the ways God's working through you to love well?
I'm going to say two things. First thing, what love well means to me is don't talk about love. Be love. Be the person that you want to see. Be the change you want to be. If you're talking to another girl or another boy, think of them. Almost imagine that they were your child. How would you talk to your child? You know, just every interaction that you have, just love people with the love of Christ, the kind of love that doesn't discriminate. When you look at the love of Christ, it was a love that had no boundaries. Doesn't matter what you do, where you're from, what your past is, but he wanted to love you. And so that's what I strive to live for, and that's what love well means to me. But secondly, if you want to know what love well means to me, come to Crosswalk Jakarta.
Ooh, okay. I like that plug you're putting in there, because you know, if you want to hear more about his story, the way that God's been putting things on his heart, Pastor Johnny, you're up there preaching. Yeah. And so we appreciate hearing from you and having that. Give us one final message you want to send the people home with. If you could have one thing that just settles on everyone's heart, if they're going to tune in just for one last bit, what do you want them to hear?
Take the risk. Don't be afraid to take the risk. Whatever it is, take the risk. If God has called you somewhere, go with him. It's going to be the best decision. You're never going to regret it. It's going to be difficult, but it's going to build character. It's going to turn you into such a beautiful person. Take that risk.
Awesome. Yeah. Pastor Johnny, we appreciate you giving us the time, telling your story, and encouraging a little bit of all of us with what you have to share. And most of all, just thanks for doing ministry here in Crosswalk Jakarta. The impact you're making, man, it's changing lives. And this church, this body wouldn't be the same without you. So thank you.
Praise the Lord, man. Praise the Lord.
And thank you guys for watching. Hey, if you've made it this far, you probably enjoyed the episode. So make sure that you like, comment, and share. That way you can continue to find content just like this.
And if you'd like to get in touch with us, or perhaps if you've got a story that you would like to share with the world, hit us up on Instagram. We would love to get in touch with you and to share your stories. See you next time.